However, and this is why, again, for everybody that's going to, call me racist and all of these things, I'll say it again. I wanted a black African to be Pope. And you may be wondering why, ladies and gentlemen. You may be wondering why. And it's because this came from a post on X, but I double-checked it to make sure it was true, and it actually is. Cardinal Robert Sarah, who is a Guinean prelate. He's the Archbishop of Conakry and prefect of the Congregation of Divine Worship, was quoted in an X post saying, "Those who use the Bible to justify mass immigration are bewitched." Now, again, people say wrong things in social media posts, right? People lie. People attribute things to religious leaders that they didn't actually say. However, having asked Grok, did he actually say what he said, what the post claimed that he said? Yes, in fact, he did make this statement in 2019 in an interview with the French magazine VOTV. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He criticized religious leaders for using the Gospels to promote mass immigration and described them as bewitched. So here's that. Here's talking about that from the Daily Caller, ladies and gentlemen. Cardinal Sarah denounces using the Bible to justify mass immigration. So those of you making the case that we need to be super empathetic and open our borders to everybody under the guise of empathy and Christians should not be turning people away or whatever, allow me to let this, prelate, archbishop, cardinal explain, all right? Because again, it echoes a lot of the things that I said. When it says that Christians are to make disciples of all nations, you can't do that if you don't have any nations. To have nations, you have to have borders, and you have to have people within those nations that correspond and make that nation what it is. Cardinal Sarah of Guinea called out religious leaders who use the Bible to justify mass immigration. In the French magazine, the cardinal said that priests and bishops who use the Gospels to promote mass immigration are bewitched. He also added that most immigrants who migrate to Europe often end up living in poor conditions and without work or dignity, or in many instances they're used as an imported slave class, which is why, I believe it was Deliveroo, but it might have been Uber Eats. You might hear me mute these names because I don't want to, imply that it was. One of the prominent food delivery services said on social media that they were now potentially going to have to hike their prices up a little bit because of constraints on illegal workers. Quite literally saying they want illegal migrants in because they can pay them less. They can pay them less because then they can charge less for their services so that they can make more money in the long run, simply because they want an imported slave class. They want an imported slave class. These people are of the mindset that the Democrats and the Southerners were at the height of the American Civil War, for example, by saying they wanted cheap labor. They wanted cheap labor, which they could either pay nothing for or pay very little, because if they had to give this job to a regular British person, they would have to pay them more. They'd have to pay them more, and it would hurt their bottom line a little bit more. The business would still grow, obviously, but it meant people would have to pay more, but they'd have to pay their workers more, and, oh, God forbid, the standard of living would rise. God forbid we wouldn't be living in serfdom anymore. But again, they want the illegal workers to come in because they can pay them less, because they'll work for less, because everything else is taken care of them by the taxpayer. So it's literally an imported slave class. And sadly, if you use the delivery services, that's what you are supporting. That's why I won't use them anymore. Because actually, not only do I not want to further compound the problem of mass immigration into my country, I also don't want to support slavery. I also don't want to support modern slavery, which is exactly what it is. He said, God never wanted these heartbreaks, the cardinal said. It is better for people better to help people flourish in their culture than to encourage them to come to Europe in full decadence. It is a false exegesis to use the word of God to promote migration. Clear as fucking day. You wonder why, again, I wanted a black African to be Pope? This is why. Because, again, it does seem that he's the only one with a backbone and understanding. Like I said before, he was the one that allegedly said before that you are, again, speaking to the Polish people, you are Poles first, then Catholic, then European. It's not this nebulous identity. Your ethnic identity does, in fact, matter. And it is better, And that's one of the things that people don't want to, say about colonialism, that in many instances, the British Empire, in many ways, brought massive advancements to other areas of the world where now they've actually regressed in many ways. Rhodesia, which is in many ways giving it was a British, colony, and it later on went independent as a country, and then we suicided it. But again, it was a paradise in Africa. It was an absolute paradise. And since it became Zimbabwe, they've gone from using electricity to power their homes to now using candles. So again, they've regressed in massive ways, and that's something that people don't want to accept. Is again, better to help people flourish in their culture than come to Europe full of decadence. But obviously that is kryptonite to our political leaders because they want the votes. This is the thing. There's nothing empathetic. There's nothing religious in any way about mass immigration. It's purely a political, genocidal initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a British person, you need to understand that. You need to understand that you have a target on your back. You're being replaced. And it's good people like Cardinal Sarah that are actually pointing it out. That's why I actually wanted him to be Pope. I actually thought that he would be a great Pope because he understands this. He understands this, and he tells it like it is. He tells it like it is, and he's actually one of the people, again, that is in these positions actually fighting for the peoples of their native lands, fighting for the people of Europe, fighting for the people of Britain. I don't know if he's actually mentioned anything like the rape gangs and stuff like that, but it's echoing sentiment that, again, it backs up the nationalist narrative in many ways, not necessarily to the many extremes that I think many people want to take it. But again, saying here that it is a false exegesis to use the word of God to promote migration sticks a knife in the heart, a stake in the heart of anybody that would use religion and compassion and empathy and all of these things to promote these suicidal political initiatives. And that's just the way it is. So thank God for Cardinal Sarah in this way. And God, imagine how things may have been a lot different if he was Pope. Can you imagine if he was Pope and how different the war in the Middle East may have been? Because he might have been a lot more different with his rhetoric, stronger with his rhetoric. How maybe different the war in Ukraine would have been. It does seem that in many ways when you don't have figures in these positions that you respect, and in many ways fear is an element of respect as well. This is what happens, and especially with an institution that is important as the Church of St. Peter. If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valleys X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.